Oh! Oh! Oh!
40 seconds.
I'm surprised. Apparently, you can kill people without lifting a finger.
Number 15, Ichi the Killer from Takashi Miike. Now, Ichi the Killer, if you've never seen it, Ichi the Killer is actually a story about a shy, timid boy, or not boy, but man, he's a very young man, probably about 17 or 18, who has been honed to become a killer. And I read the manga of this, and the manga was absolutely gruesome and crazy and absolutely insane. And Takashi Miike actually captured the sense of Ichi the Killer, in my opinion. It was a fantastic adaptation. Now, much as it goes with many live action adaptations, especially Japanese ones, the ending got extremely weird and veered off somewhere else. But the movie by itself is actually a cult classic among horror and slasher fanatics who don't actually realize that it was originally a manga. They've just been passed along this story, this film, and they're told to watch it, and they love it. I actually was introduced to this film by a horror fanatic who isn't necessarily a manga or anime fan, and I actually found out that it was a manga later, long after I found the movie. So, but the manga did actually come first. So yeah, that's number 15, Ichi the Killer, from Takashi Miike.
Kids!
Number 14, Ansatsu Kyoshitsu, or Assassination Classroom. Yes, there is a live-action adaptation of this movie, and it is actually very interesting. This is yet another... I've read the first few chapters of the manga, and from what I've read of it, it's fairly accurate. The special effects were great. And one thing I've got to give them credit for that I've had problems with Japanese live actions movies that are encompassing a long time is that the pacing is terrible. This was my problem with Uchi Kyodai. This was my problem with Prince of Tennis, and these movies in particular. However, Assassination Classroom manages to capture an entire an entire academic year, and fit it together in a way that it doesn't actually feel rushed, which is what I like. And then also Koro Sensei was actually very lovable. I even cried at the end of it because I didn't want them to succeed in the student's mission of killing him. So they actually did a good job with Koro Sensei. My one major issue with this movie, and it's going to come up a couple times in this list, is that there's one particular character who is supposed to be Russian, a Russian immigrant, and she's cast she was cast as a Japanese woman with an obviously blonde wig and a very heavy accent whenever she attempts to speak English. So yeah, that was my one very major issue with this, was that they didn't cast a gaijin in this one single gaijin role, which is actually fairly common in Japanese media, unfortunately.
1号2号ただいま参上
Number 13, Yatterman. So if you've never heard of Yatterman, which a lot of Westerners probably haven't, Yatterman is actually a anime series about these dual superheroes called Yatterman. And originally, I believe it came out in the 70s or 80s, and then there was a revival series, or not a revival, but maybe a revival, but or a reboot series that was created at the turn of the century in the 2000s, and it's actually a very, very goofy series. It comes from Tatsunoko, who, if you've ever played Tatsunoko versus Capcom, Yatterman is actually in that game, as well as his primary villain. I believe her name is Doronja. If I can't remember her name specifically. But the movie itself, once again done by Takashi Miike, absolutely excellent, super cartoony, funny from beginning to end. And one of the things that I loved most about this movie is that it treats itself as an episode of the series. So there's a lot of references to catch us again on Saturday mornings, and we only fight villains on Saturday mornings, and things like that. So it's not only that, there's also a cameo from the original voice actors. If you're a fan of the old series from the if you're a fan of the original series, there's cameos from the original voice actors, which is actually very funny. But yeah, that's Yatterman. I personally loved it. I hope you guys do too. Number 12, Edge of Tomorrow. Now, I know there's probably a bunch of you that are going, what are you talking about, Edge of Tomorrow? Are you talking about the movie with Tom Cruise? Yes, I am talking about the movie with Tom Cruise. Was actually adapted from a light novel, which was then adapted into a full manga called All You Need Is Kill. And this movie was actually, I mean, the movie made a lot of money. Nobody knew it was an adaptation of a Japanese story. And the movie was actually very interesting, very fun. It was, loved it from beginning to, I would say, about 3/4 of the end. If you ever saw it, you know what I'm talking about. At the end, it gets extremely weird, which isn't unlike Japanese storytelling. But in this case, it actually veers off a lot from the original, from the manga story at least. But they naturally, with the adaptation to the West, and there's not much difference in terms of this. They switched the origins of the characters. So in the original story, the Tom Cruise's character is actually a Japanese soldier, and the Emily Blunt's character, I believe, was from the U.S. Now, in the Tom Cruise movie, obviously they switched it so that he was American and she was British. but the story was essentially the same. And it was actually, I liked the movie. I thought the movie was great. So yes, number 12, Edge of Tomorrow. Number 11, Lupin III. So there have actually been two live-action movies of Lupin III. The first was a movie from the 70s called Strange Psychokinetic Psychokinetic something or other. But this, and that was very loosely based on Lupin. And it was very, very, very silly. Whereas this is referring to the 2014 movie starring Shun Oguri, who as I've mentioned in many, many of my live action movie videos, he's in like every single movie. He's in a number of these movies that I'm going to be mentioning in some manner in terms of character. So Lupin III was actually very fun. It was mostly action, but there were some comedic elements. And I've heard some bad things about it, but I didn't personally notice anything bad about it when I watched it. I personally loved it. It was in terms of action, it was great. It was cartoony in many areas. Not as cartoony as the 70s one, but pretty cartoony. And it didn't necessarily feel like it stretched itself, which is another problem that some Japanese movies have. And my one major issue with this movie was that in every scene, well, I shouldn't say major issue. It's not really a major issue, but there's like one giant dinner scene where they speak English the entire time, and it almost, and I think it was close to the beginning of the movie, but it kind of took me out of it because it was just this giant scene where everybody spoke English, and then after that everybody spoke Japanese. So it almost felt like they should have just done Japanese the entire movie, because it was that kind of, it felt like it was really that far out of the way just to have them speak English. So yeah, that's my number 11, Lupin III. Sakigake Otokujuku.